Future's now, old man.
What it do, Labubu? This is Future First podcast where we are helping you win today with a future first mindset. I'm your co-host Jmac here with my co-host Jose. What's going on, man? You got any Labubus?
No, I do not. I'm good, J-Mac. How you doing?
I'm good, brother. Yeah, man. I don't get the craze, but they're all over the place. Hey, man. So, how's your Toklan team doing?
We doing all right. We're 6-0 right now. Second most points for, so we're in second place right now. We're actually playing the number one team, Burrito Bill, who's been just on a crazy tear. And now we've gotten three major injuries: Aaron Jones, Mike Evans, CeeDee Lamb. So we're hurting. Schedule's going to be a little bit nice to us after Burrito Bill playing some of the lower ranked teams, but trying to get through it, see what happens after that. Made a little trade to get Debo just to try to, back up that wide receiver room while guys are hurt. But yeah, it's going good. We're on the right track.
Yeah, man. You gotta shore up that those holes, right? You're just
Yeah,
slapping the
plug it.
Flex Seal patch on the
Yeah,
flood that CDA
yeah,
created.
yeah. The gif of that guy. Yeah, exactly. Using the tape when the boat's sinking or whatever. But how about yours, man? How's Tokeland treating you?
It's a rough start. I think I talked about it last time. I'm 3-3. It wasn't as bad as I sold it initially, but I think I was 1-3 going into last week, and I played hammy. So it's like 3-3 was expected. And I'm going against Fox this week. She is contending, but also off to a rough start like me. Yeah, man, I was just kind of had some bad injuries. Not even bad injuries, just kind of injuries that plague slow start. Drake London, Lad McConkey, Brock Bowers has been hurt. Um, Derrick Henry has been outside of that first game. It's kind of fallen off a little bit. Hopefully, he can put that crown back on and be my king that I need him to be. But yeah, likewise, man. I got Debo in a couple leagues too, so we can ride that Debo wave together. But
Yeah, I don't know how I ended up with so much Debo because going into the offseason, it was not a player that I was looking at. But I scroll through my teams and I'm just like, I have way too many commanders. I have a couple teams where like I have three commanders somehow, and I'm like, I don't want to start all these guys, especially now that Daniels is hurt. So yeah, I'm banking on Debo here. I don't know what's going on with Terry, all that stuff,
yeah,
but hopefully he can get me through a few weeks here.
yeah, scary, scary. Terry's definitely scary right now, but you know what's not scary? Our
What's not?
YouTube channel. Get onto our YouTube channel, touch down on that like button, and go for two on that subscribe. Drop us a comment. We love engaging with you guys. Shout out to Fox. She's been helping us with our graphics here. Hope you're well, Fox. You can follow her on X at bfoxworth07. We're also on Spotify and Apple Pods. You can follow and rate the show there. Drop us a review. We got another banger of an episode teed up for you guys today. We're gonna go over some of our seasonal priors, what we got right, what we got wrong. We feel like we have 3 weeks of data here. We can kind of put a little bit more in the books and kind of find out, check back in on some of those. We're also going to talk about state of the franchise. We're going to look at our dynasty teams and evaluate where you stand in within your leagues and kind of give you guys some tips and tricks just to kind of go forward with confidence or the tools that you need to get you those championships. But first, we got a quick hit, man. You ready for it?
Let's do it.
All right. Today on the quick hit, I wanted to bring up something I found quite interesting, which is passing rates over expected. We have 3 weeks of data here. And this is pretty much showing us, you know, how how often a team is passing the ball percentage wise more than expected, right? So it looks at all sorts of situational metrics, like what down and distance it is, I think it even looks at if they're the home team. It looks at if they're in, a hurry up, all sorts of different scenarios or situations that would play into when you expect a team to pass over when you expect them to run the ball. So what we have on screen here for you guys listening is the pass rate over expectation weeks 1 through 3. We have the top 5 and the bottom 5 offenses here based on these 3 weeks of data so far. The top 5 are the Kansas City Chiefs, the Los Angeles Chargers, Jacksonville Jaguars, Arizona Cardinals, and the Denver Broncos in order. And then the bottom 5 are the Minnesota Vikings, Detroit Lions, Seattle Seahawks, Philadelphia Eagles, and the New York Jets in last place there. So those 5 teams are running the ball more than they should be, whereas these top 5 teams are passing the ball more than they should be. So, Jose, we haven't talked about this too much, and I don't know what you kind of experience you have with this, but seeing this, what's your take on this? What do you kind of bring away from it?
Yeah, I mean, kind of the basis of our show is that this is your forte and I'm not mine. So, I mean, when I hear this, I just hear like, passing over expectation. Like that just means those are the type of wide receiver rooms that I want to get into, right? If a team is just passing more than there should be expected to do so, that means that all their wide receivers have more opportunities to score. So I'm looking at those teams and saying, well, what players am I interested in? What offenses can I get into maybe on the cheap? So the Chiefs, as we've been talking about, right? Rice is a guy we've been kind of pounding the table for, and I think a lot of people are expecting him to be a pretty big, important player as they come back. Worthy's healthy now, right? It seems like he's going to play this week. So those type of things. I mean, there's some that are, I do wonder some of this, like based on like, are the teams bad? Like the Jaguars have been pretty bad. So have they just been, and the Cardinals kind of too, even though they were 2-1, now 2-2 after Thursday. Is it like, are they just behind? So they're throwing a lot more. Like, how does that stat kind of play into that? Because I mean, the Jaguars throw a ton, but nobody's been happy with a single, wide receiving option on that team. So, it's a balance. It's always, a nice data point, I think, to have to make, some inferred guesses and just make some moves in season, right? That you can kind of take advantage of.
Yeah, you kind of nailed it. Like these guys lit up in green here, which are the top 5, are the guys that you want to invest in pass catchers. And it's only 3 weeks of data. This can kind of change. As you can see, they fluctuated, over these 3 weeks even. The Kansas City Chiefs in week 1 were 13.1, in week 2, 3.6, week 3, 10.2. It's a good call out to, like, are they just doing this because, they can't run the ball, which is, probably pretty true, especially for the Chiefs. They don't really have a great backfield. The Jaguars, they've been splitting the backfield, so maybe it's just getting their guys in rhythm. Playing from behind, that's taken into account when we look at these. So these are just over expectations. So these offenses just are looking to throw the ball, even when they, should be running the ball. But yeah, I do wonder how much of, like confidence in a backfield plays into this. I don't think that's, situationally being captured in these charts here. So yeah, to me, what I'm looking at is, hey, I want Kansas City Chiefs pass catchers. Like I invested in Worthy the other day. I want Rice. I'm not trying to sell him. Chargers, give me Keenan Allen, Quentin Johnson. Go buy Ladd right now if you can get him on the cheap. Like he's gonna bounce back, whether it's due to an injury in that wide receiver room or it's just variance. He's gonna hit. He's a good wide receiver. Yeah, same with the Jags. I mean, buy BTJ right now if you can. I'm kind of just leaning into it. I don't really believe in Trevor Lawrence all that much, but I don't think BTJ is going to be as bad as he's been this far. Yeah, and then on the inverse of this, when I see these guys in red, these are guys I want to invest in their backfield. And I'm just trying to get pieces where I can. Minnesota Vikings, we've been out here claiming, to get in on that Freemason army here. There he is, free Mason, Jordan Mason. Buy high right now. I think he'll do great, getting you guys points while Aaron Jones is out, and who knows what Aaron Jones is when he comes back, if he's back. Detroit Lions is kind of hard to get buy into, but I mean Monty is probably the cheaper piece there, and I think it's worthwhile. I think he's just overlooked every year. He's like the Jacoby Myers of running backs, where all he does is produce, but he's cheap and he can get you points. Same with the Seahawks. Like, I don't care. Give me Sharps, give me Kenneth Walker. I think I'd prefer Kenneth Walker, but if I can get Sharps and just bank on chaos to happen, and then he sees a bigger share in that backfield, and then the Jets. The Jets have all three of them. Like, I don't know. Take your pick. Go get pieces of these because they want to run the ball. That's kind of my take on it. Yeah, I thought this was interesting. Maybe we'll check back in on these, in a few more weeks, see how things are changing and lining out. But it's good to keep your finger on the pulse of these kind of things so that you can put yourself in position to take advantage of statistics like this. All right, man. I'm done boring you with the stats here.
Nah, never boring, man. It's always good to get a little different perspective, dive into these type of things, because like you said, man, it's just another data point, another little thing to add to your repertoire to keep an eye on, right? It's not everything. It doesn't mean the end all be all, but every little piece of the puzzle that you have that maybe your opponents aren't using is always going to help, that little edge, right? So for sure, man.
Yeah, you nailed it. All right, man, you ready to talk about what we were stupid about, but also what we were really great about?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. All right, man. Let's jump into some seasonal priors here. Here, we're just going to give you some of our takes that we had in the past that we think are looking good or not so good. I'll start it off here, and maybe too soon to victory lap this, but Danny Diamonds is out here QB4 in them streets right now, which is just wild. Of course, we're talking about Daniel Jones here, and for the Indianapolis Colts, I think I came on here and said that he was going to surprise us all, and I think he's done that. And hopefully he can go forward and keep doing it. When I made this argument, what was probably like 2 months ago now, it was based on him having great weapons around him, being in a good offensive scheme with a good coach and a good offensive line, probably the best he's had. And he has rushing upside. And one thing I think I didn't really take into account, I did say the great weapons around him, but I was talking more about the pass catchers. But Jonathan Taylor is absolutely just on a tear right now, just getting things done, putting Danny Diamonds in a position where he can succeed, when taking some heat off of him. So yeah, man, we'll see how that goes. I picked him up for a second in that 14-team Superflex league, and that is looking like a huge steal right now. I've won all 6 of my matchups, and I think he's been a big part of that. So
yeah, 100%. I mean, just to kind of go off with you, with what you're saying with Danny Dimes. I mean, my take was when we did our running backs episode, we were talking about the dynasty running backs who, outside of those kind of top 4 or 5 guys that are kind of solidified, was going to emerge. And like you said, Jonathan Taylor, he was the guy that I called out. So I mean, the Colts are the surprise of the NFL season. I mean, we always kind of have one of these teams that kind of rebounds very surprisingly, and so far the Colts have been it. So it's, to me, not surprising that 2 Colts made the list for our positives, things we called out. But yeah, I mean, JT was kind of left as the boring pick, not that exciting. I don't know why people were so off on him. I mean, last year was a lot of injuries. It was not a great season, but he was the running back 1 overall not too long ago, and he's trending currently to do that again, right? I mean, he has the potential to finish the RB1. I think right now in points he is. Right, he was drafted in the early 2nd, and now he's completely, outperforming anybody that you took pretty much in the 1st round, in definitely after. So Jonathan Taylor is looking like his prime, and if the Colts keep this up, right, I mean, those are valuable MVP type pieces, both the running back Jonathan Taylor and Daniel Diamonds. Sorry,
That's right.
as he call him. Yeah, and so yeah, man. I mean, the Colts, just who would have expected that? And I let's keep it going. I'm happy to see them doing well. I think it's a
Yeah.
good thing.
It'll be interesting this week. I think this is a real test here against the Rams. We're recording this on Friday, by the way, but it won't be released until Monday here. So we're living in the past here, guys. Sorry to keep you down, but yeah, man, JT is real good. He won me a championship last year. He was real good in the fantasy playoffs last year, even though he didn't end up, topping the leaderboards of fantasy finishes overall. Like you said, I think he dealt with some injuries and stuff. Yeah, so let's turn off the spotlight here and go over some things we got wrong. Um, and for me, I got a lot of things wrong, but it was hard to find one on that I've talked about on this podcast. And I don't feel like this was a huge miss, but it definitely was a miss. And that's Chris Olave coming in here. He's wide receiver 24 on this season after three weeks, but he was drafted around wide receiver 36. I made the argument that the offense is bad, but they've been viable. What's his name? Rat Tail. Rat. What's his
Spencer Rattler, yeah,
Rattler?
Rat
Yeah,
Tail.
there you go.
He'll love that name, I'm sure.
Spencer Rattler has actually looked, somewhat decent back there, able to get the ball out to the playmakers, and he's been buoying Olave just based on volume alone. I think I heard a stat the other day too, where Olave is 8 points under expected, fantasy points under expected than what he should be getting, and that's on per game basis. So just by the volume alone, like he's not meeting what he should be getting. And a lot of that, I think, is just those inefficiencies we talked about. But he's getting the volume where he can actually be fantasy relevant, and he's not taking your team when you were taking them in the 7th. I went in and was saying I'd rather have guys like Ridley and Diggs, who are getting drafted right around him. Those were not better picks. You'd be much better off with Olave right now than either of those two who have been actively tanking your team. More so Ridley than Diggs. But sorry, am I stealing your poop light on that one? We'll let you get there. But I did shout out Odunze was another guy in the 7th round who that's who you really wanted in that 7th round. But yeah, man, Diggs not good, and you tell us how else or who else isn't good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, following suit there. I was pretty in on Calvin Ridley, right? Like there's nobody else there, but the Titans are just a complete mess, right? Cam Ward has struggled profusely in the NFL. I think he has so far one of the lowest completion percentages of starters, and the Titans are just a mess, right? I mean, if nothing's really working, they're not scoring points. Even if he is like the lone target there, it doesn't matter when he can't get the ball to him, and there's just no offense, no touchdowns being scored. So kind of exactly what you were talking about, right? Kind of piggyback off that he was not the value that I thought he was, and just for the guys that you could have gotten around there, especially Odunze, who you called out, right, who's looking like a breakout, potentially top 12 type of finish, is just a miss, right? And like that's what you were hoping, the value you were hoping there is not just not even being met, it's pretty much grossly underperforming that, right? Like, I mean, Calvin Ridley right now is not a guy you can start pretty much in any format unless it's some really, really deep format. Like if you've started him the first 3 weeks, if you've been able to win, then you've been able to win in spite of him, not because he helped you in any sort of meaningful way. So that was definitely one I got wrong. Probably the only thing I got wrong on this podcast, I think. I mean, nobody go back and watch to double check that, but you got to be wrong sometimes.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, and just to shout out a couple other ones things that I did get right this season that weren't necessarily on here, but yeah, Michael Pittman was another one, talking about Colts again. Roma Dunze was another guy that I had and was big on, that was going late. and some other ones that I missed on. I feel like RJ Harvey, I was taking him, in the fifth and sixth rounds pretty regularly, sometimes even in the fourth, which has not paid off. J.K. Dobbins has been the guy you wanted. Javonte Williams has probably been another miss of mine. Just not having enough of him. I don't know. Maybe that looks good, 3 weeks from now, but I don't know if you got
Oh,
any
it
other.
will. It will. I mean, a complete side tangent. Like, I would not start a single Cowboy this week. I know you guys are going to see this on Monday, so we're going to know the thrashing. But I am just completely out on the Cowboys for the foreseeable future. But yeah, I mean, JSN is looking like the break. The full stratosphere into those type guys. Like the guy, I could see him being one of the guys that right after those big 3-4 dynasty guys are coming off the board in startups, dynasty startups next year. I think Darnold has looked to continue that he can, do what he needs to do. So that one was definitely one. But yeah, man, I think like it's 3 weeks. I think we can also
Yeah,
come back, revisit this and see. But right now, some of those hits and misses are looking pretty spot on.
yeah, for sure, for sure. All right. Well, let's get out of these takes here and let's get into looking at our dynasty squads. All right, we're moving into our state of the franchise segment here where we're just gonna go over some of the situations that your teams might be in, and how to progress. Whether you're staying on course or you need to kind of change things up because things aren't really going as planned. Um, but yeah, I mean, we'll start with some of the easy ones here. Um, and are you rebuilding? And how do you know if you're rebuilding, right? Um, and to me, it should be pretty obvious. Like rebuilds are intentional. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Is it different for you? Do you find yourself just falling into rebuilds? And
No, I mean, hopefully, you wouldn't have known that you were a rebuilder before the season. I mean, sometimes things like, maybe you got an aging roster or something, and you think you have another push in you, to make a chance, a contender. I think those are the times where all of a sudden you find yourself in a rebuild when you didn't think, like, a bunch of old players, and then all of a sudden maybe you were counting on Derrick Henry, all these aging vets, and it's not working out. And then you find yourself maybe you need to rebuild in the middle of the season. But no, I mean, most of the time, if you're doing a rebuild well, you should be going into a season knowing you're doing a rebuild. Even if you have startable assets, you should know that you're waiting, come trade deadline or, around halfway through the season when contenders are looking to buy, that you're going to be ready to sell. So hopefully for most of you guys out there, if you're rebuilding, you kind of went into the season knowing that was your plan of action, right?
yeah, I agree. And and maybe you weren't sure that you needed a rebuild. But either way, like it should be pretty clear now after 3 weeks. Like, if your team's not really getting there, you need to commit. Dynasty 101, have a goal and objective for your team and align all your actions with that goal and team. So when you're in a rebuild, you need to be making trades that make sense for the future, and getting rid of expiring assets that are only good for production value now. Yeah, so I think that's the easy side of it. The
Yeah,
hard.
I mean, what I would say with that is make sure you're stacking those future first, right? I mean, that's what we're all about here. So if you're rebuilding, that's got to be the goal, and you got to get in early. Like you don't want to be the second or third team rebuilding just because those first dry up, right? Like there's going to be contenders, and you're going to be like, oh, let me trade them this, and they've already sold their first, and now you might not have that partner anymore to trade with. So, but yeah, like you said, let's talk about contending now.
Yeah, that one's a little harder to figure out, I feel like. You came into the season and you're probably like you should have an idea like, okay, I'm contending here. Uh, and sometimes in startups it's a little harder to navigate whether or not you're contending because, you know, you don't have, you know, seasons of data to kind of give you a good foundation of where everyone should be. And because the startup draft happened, it's like a redraft almost in some ways. Um, Everyone's team should be fairly balanced unless people, punted or went all in right off the bat. Um, but if that's not the case and you're coming in, you should have a pretty good idea if you're contending. And if not, like your record is indicative now of your contending. But sometimes it's still not always clear. Maybe you're 3-0 or 6-0, but maybe your team's just overperforming, or maybe you had a weak schedule, right? And you're just playing bad teams, or maybe you got lucky. Maybe a couple of your guys broke free for 3 touchdown games like Trey Tucker. I don't know, but either way, like I think Dynasty Daddy is a great tool to help give you a rough idea. I'm always looking at power rankings and using the playoff calculator to kind of not weigh my odds. I don't take it for face value, but I am looking at it relative to my opponents. What are my odds versus their odds, right? If there's 3 teams that have a 90% chance, of making the playoffs, and I'm like 5 and 6, like, like there's a good chance, maybe I'm not making the playoffs, or vice versa, right? Right. What if there's 5 teams in front of you that are real strong contenders, and you're just kind of sitting on the brim, like maybe you thought you're a contender, but you're not. Hopefully it'd be clear if there's 5 teams in front of you that have a 90% chance of making the playoffs. It should have been clear a long time ago that you're not really contending. But yeah, I don't know. How do you know you're a contender, Jose? What do you look at?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I think sometimes people that are playing Dynasty fall into the redraft mentality, which is kind of like, oh, if I make the playoffs, I have a shot. And I honestly, I don't buy that in Dynasty really. Well, going into a season or around this point, I want to know that I'm a top 2 team and at most a top 3 team. And to me, kind of, you can use Dynasty Daddy power rankings. You can look in some of the big leagues, the ones that I'm only care about. I'm in too many leagues to do this for every league, but I'll just straight up pull the data of like my starting opponents, either just screenshots on my phone or into a spreadsheet, and I'm just comparing. I'm just literally based on what I think of players. I'm comparing starter spot for starter spot and just seeing like how am I stacking up versus these
Mm.
guys. Like on paper, my team maybe looks really good, but then I flip over and I was a guy's team who was maybe a contender. All of a sudden, his players have glowed up and he's a much more of a threat, something like that. And then what's the bench like is this guy 1 injury away from his team being crippled? Am I 1 injury away from being crippled? And make moves according to that. I know we're going to talk a little bit later about type of moves to make, but that's kind of how I do it. I do my own little power rankings, and I want to be in that top 3. Like if I'm not and I still want to compete, then I'm getting active like right away to put me into that spot.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I think going into a season thinking you're contending is a little bit easier to think because everybody wants to think they're contending, but you really need to know kind of ASAP, because just like we're talking about trading for future first, if you're going to be the guy that's going all in, you also want to buy in first, right? Because there's going to be a guy somewhere that's selling a piece cheaper, and as soon as that kind of frenzy start, if you're in an active league, a league with players that know what's going on, once the feeding frenzy starts, the guys
Mm-hmm.
that are rebuilding, they get a lot tighter with their pieces, right? They know what they're holding, and they start asking for more than maybe the face value, right? So I think you also want to be ready to make that aggressive move first. You don't want the other contender. We were talking about trades that that kind of made you feel crappy last week, right? You don't want to be the guy sitting there, the notification goes off, and somebody just traded for 2 premier win now assets, and you're looking at like, damn, I thought I was better than that guy. Now he's got a leg up on me, and now those resources are gone, right? Because once contending pieces hit a contender's team as another contender, it's very, very difficult. Maybe you found it the other differently, but for me, it's very hard to trade with another contender once the stuff hits the fan. Like once people are going for that championship, they're eyeing the championship. People don't really want to trade across the aisles like as easily as they might earlier on in the season.
No, yeah, those are all wise words. And I think, like, to sum it up, right, you need to be the first to make the moves what no matter what direction that's in. If you're first in line to get to those assets, whether they're future capital or they're the premium production guys, you're going to be better off. And what aligns with that also is what you were saying is that first later in the season doesn't hold as much weight because now people can concretely say like this is a late first. Earlier in this season, when you're still 3-0, like people still hold priors, and they may look at your roster and be like, "There's no way Quentin Johnston's gonna keep producing at what he's doing. Like this guy's gonna crumble. He thinks his first is late. It's really a mid." So just that uncertainty of it, you can actually do more with it, and even future out like like there's even an argument to start spending 2026 2027 first. Like people don't know what your roster is going to look like then. There's a little more ambiguity, that one word that I can't say right now, to those first, where you can actually capitalize on that value. So it's just something to keep in mind. As long as you can feel safe and don't mortgage too much, that's a good thought there. But yeah, so now that we know you came in here with ideas of rebuilding or contending, or maybe you're in between, you need to pick a spot, pick a lane, and get there. And after 3 weeks or 4 weeks into the season here, are things going to plan? Like if you're contending and you've won your first 3 weeks or your first 4 weeks here, what kind of moves are you looking to make on a contending team that's winning? Is there anything that you do, or do you just sit?
No, definitely. You don't want to sit, right? You need to be active, like what we're talking about. If you feel like you're one of the top teams, right? You're contending, you're started out strong. I want to be the first one to put my cards on the table and say I'm going to go for the win, right? I don't care if I look at my lineup and it's the prettiest, most beautiful lineup I've ever seen in my life. It doesn't matter. Every team is a couple injuries away from being completely, downtrodden. So even if it's a depth piece, right? Like you have two stud running backs and even a third in the back. Okay, so how does a fourth stud running back hurt, right? Like it's just I want to have the start sit problems where I'm looking at my flex guys and I'm like, dang, all these guys are so
Mm-hmm.
good. Who do I want to not start, right? Because even then later, if things are still going well and you're coming to the trade deadline, maybe you can consolidate some pieces and really tear up at a situation, right? Or in the off season, you have several pieces that maybe make a tier up. Like I don't think you can ever have too many valuable assets on your team. So I'm always looking to be the first one, right? Like weeks in, as you said, like 3-4 weeks in, we're about a quarter, through the season, right? Your things should be pretty clear to you what's happening. Like obviously you can always go back and say woulda, coulda, shoulda, if this guy didn't get hurt, if this, but injuries have already happened and you got to adapt and you got to go, make a push. You got to go be aggressive. I'm always trying to be aggressive. I know some people, they don't like to look at their when they scroll down at the end of sleeper and see nothing. I'm okay with that. Like at the end of the day, like if I make that decision and I don't win, then whatever. At least I tried. Like it's one of those old cliches. Like I'm gonna give it my all, and in Dynasty, to me, giving my all is giving all my picks. Like I don't care. I'll sit in the draft and watch everybody make picks while I sit with a trophy in my lap. Like that's my mentality when I'm contending, and that's aggressive. And some people, they're I think they want to play a little bit more cautious, right? Sometimes you have to do extra buy-ins, which I understand. Sometimes financially in the middle of the season, all of a sudden having to, spend another year's buy-in because some leagues, do it like that. If you spend far out, you got to spend money. But I'm okay with that. That's just how I play.
Yeah, side note on that, I play in $100 league, and I wanted to go get Amari and Hampton, and it was going to take my 26 and 27 first. So I had to, before I did, I had to go to my wife. I'm like, look, I'm about to drop $200 here for a fake share of a player. uh,
Yeah, I mean those are real things that, like, I mean that's not nothing, right? I mean, so you I understand people being like hesitant in those type of situations, but if you win, I'm guessing the pot is,
Oh
whatever,
yeah.
4 or 5x times whatever you might have just spent. So, then you can turn around and be like, look, here's my return on my investment. Little Hampton grew up and became the running
That's
back
right.
one.
That's right. Yeah, no, I mean that was done before Najee got hurt too, so it's looking better. I need some other things to fall in line for that, but let's stay on topic here. Yeah, for me, if what I'm looking to do, you can't cruise like you're saying, right? For me, I'm looking ahead. I'm surveying the league. I'm finding my targets. I'm trying to find those rebuilders and the pretenders more importantly, because the pretenders are usually the guys that have the production pieces that you want on your team, but they're not ready to give them up yet. Whereas the rebuilders have more of those future assets that don't really make sense for what you're trying to do. And you start circling their roster like a vulture. You're just waiting for them to die and give up, so that so that you can move in and get those pieces on your roster, so that you can be the guy to kind of take it deep into the season. Yeah, and for me, like that really starts with just starting conversations with them, and understanding where they're at. Like I'm a big proponent of actually just talking to people. I know a lot of people don't like that. A lot of people like to, keep their league mates in the dark. For me, I find it better for both parties if we're just in negotiation and talking to each other. Like people can get deals done more often. They'll maximize their value out of what they're getting. The other day, just today, like I went to go offer a second for Jordan Mason, and in that same league, we were talking about it, and he was like, "Yeah, maybe," and then he sells Jordan Mason for another second, which he thought was a more valuable second, and he didn't even come back to me and say like, "Hey, like I'm gonna move this for a second." There's nothing, and I was like, I would have paid more. Like that's on you. You kind of lost out on value. If he would have just kept those communication lines open, we would have had a better experience for all of us. I would love to have Freemason Army on my squad here, coming in and doing the thing that we love to do. But yeah, staying in conversation with your league mates, understanding where they're at with their players, and letting them know you're interested in their players is huge. Then I'm also looking ahead at the schedule, trying to identify any weak points, bye weeks or tough matchups. Looking for ways that I can try to navigate around that. Um, and then I'm also building contingency plans. I'm looking at, if I lose a player at this position, like if I lose a quarterback, do I need to go buy one now, or is there one on a team that's not contending that I could easily go pick from, and get that guy off their team if that happens. Or same thing with wide receivers and running backs. I'm having an escape plan. I don't necessarily need to execute that escape plan right now, but I'm looking for ways to kind of get ahead of that, in case that happens. Yeah, so let's talk
Yeah.
about the flip side here, man. Oh, you got more to say? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna bounce a couple of things off of what you said, especially if the guys that you're relying on that are playing really well right now are guys that can be injury prone, right? Like you got CMC, knock on wood. I don't want CMC to get hurt, but we know what can happen. There's nothing that should stop you from going to secure a nice running back that you would plug in there now, because once that injury happens, everybody's gonna or they should smell the blood in the water, right? And they're gonna make you play hand over fist. And then just one other thing that I do sometimes that's a bit riskier, but if you have those pretenders that are still thinking, there's nothing that can stops you from trading for their first and waiting 4 weeks, and now they've lost 4 weeks in a row, right? And now that first that was looking, they thought they were trading a late first, and now it's a mid first, or heaven forbid it becomes a real top 5 asset pick, and then you can have that to trade, right? Like it's not always trading for players when you're contending. It seems maybe a little bit counterintuitive, but there's times where you can snake a first or a second even that's going to be early from a guy that thinks they're contending, and then all of a sudden you have a nicer pick to offer or to throw in. I mean, it's a little bit riskier. It's a little bit more of work on you because it's a trade to then set up another trade. But it's something that I've done that it's worked out pretty well. So that was just, I had a couple things that sparked my thought process as you were talking. But yeah, man,
No,
we can move on to the
no,
rebuilding
that's a
side.
great shout. I'm really glad you brought that up. It's good. It's good wisdom to kind of share there. I feel like that's probably overlooked. And it doesn't really, like you said, it's counterintuitive to what you're trying to accomplish as a contender. But I like that a lot. But yeah, let's get into the rebuilding. And if you're, after 4 weeks, everything's going as planned, you're 0-4. What are you doing, or to kind of help put yourself in a position to keep that going, but also make your squad stronger? I think it's a little easier to rebuild here. There's a little less you need to do, actively, but there's still proactive moves to be making, right?
Yeah, I mean, just because you're a rebuilder doesn't mean that all you're doing is just waiting to tank to the 101, right? Like, obviously, that should be the goal. And if you have a max points for type of finish, you do want to make sure you're staying low. But at the end of the day, I mean, the 101 is not always secured as going to be the best player, right? You want to make sure you have a top end pick so you're not, on the 105 type of range. But there's nothing also that stops you from going to go get I guess Joe Burrow might be the best example of that. Like, if you need a cornerstone piece and it's injured on a contending team, this might be the cheapest that you'll ever get them, right? Like, if you need a player to build around and you want to be more solid as a rebuilder, there's nothing that says you can't potentially go and acquire pieces now, right? Like, at some point out of a rebuild, you need startable players, and what we see from the rookie drafts is there's a lot of misses, right? So you can have a lot of picks, but unless you really, really get lucky to fill out your starting roster, you're going to need known players, right? You're not going to just have a completely rookie year 2, year 3 player pool on your team. Like, obviously, you want to rebuild through the draft, and you can do other things with those picks. So if there's an underperformer, like, I think Drake London's a great person right now. Maybe if somebody's pretty upset, they're trying to contend. Drake London was supposed to be a big piece that you could go target, right? That's just a guy that comes off the top of my mind. Maybe his value hasn't depreciated enough, but those are the type of things I'm also doing. I'm looking for depreciated assets that I'm into, right? I mean, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. was sort of that. I think a lot of people were freaking out. He kind of had that bounce back fourth quarter, but those are the assets that I'm looking to snipe off a contenders team or maybe another, middle of the pack team. And then kind of what we talked about, right? Like, pay attention to those teams, especially the pretenders, right? If you want to use Dynasty Daddy or whatever, those guys that are thinking they go all in, they're trying to go all in, right? Especially keep your tabs on them. Like, check their team regularly, look at their record, maybe look ahead in their schedule. Like you were talking about earlier, are they about to play like the top 2 teams in the league? So they're about to take 2 L's that they weren't maybe thinking, or things like that. There's lots you can do. I mean, there's nothing that stops you from continuously working on your team, even if you're rebuilding, right? Like, thinking that, oh, I'm tanking to the 101 and I have a couple extra picks, like, I'm set. I don't need to touch this team until next year, until the rookie draft. It's just not the way that you're going to get the most value that you can, and your rebuild is probably just going to take longer.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and I think buying into injuries too is worthwhile, right? Like, you could probably go flip Caleb for, you know, Joe Burrow right now, right? Like, I think you could probably get that done, especially if Joe Burrow was on a serious contending team. Like, you might even be able to get something on top of Joe Burrow. Like, that's the kind of leverage that you hold right now. Like, beginning of the season, that's not happening. But now that we're in season and we're scoring points and the chaos is hitting, like, you recognize the position that you're in to kind of make the moves that will capitalize for you. Um, Also, this isn't going to hit home with everybody, but I feel like it should be said. Like, if you are moving into a rebuild and you're looking to tank, figure out what your league needs for you to do to get to that one-on-one, because it's not the same for every league. It's going to be different, and having that in the foreground rather than, just being like, oh, all I got to do is lose and I'll get that 101. Like, I play in a league where it's the first spot out of the playoffs. So if there's, 6 teams in the playoffs, it's the number 7 team gets the 101. And then from there on out, it's the worst record in the team gets the 102. So like there's weird quirky things like that. We play in, Toe Clan. We have this spreadsheet of destiny, which is kind of, not confrontational, but yeah, I'll let you speak on that.
Nah, I mean, I'm just not a fan of that particular thing. It just feels like it adds a little bit of extra kind of randomness to a game that's already random. Plus, you almost snake Genty from me in a mirror league of the Toe Clan this last off season. But yeah, and I mean, with that, I think this is where league constitutions are pretty important. Like, I'm not a cheater, but like if my league says I can start the 4th string, running back that's active but going to get 0 points just so I can get L's, I'm going to do that. I'm sorry. Like, maybe that's a controversial thing. I know some people get really upset, but like if the rules say I just have to start active players, then I'm going to get as many L's. And even if my points for aren't, I'm just going to make sure that I don't sneakily sneak into like the last playoff spot somehow. Right. Like, or something weird happens, so I'm going to do that. And if your league doesn't even have the max points for it, it's just about who lost the most games, like, and there's nothing stopping you from tanking that way, then I don't see why you wouldn't, I mean,
Yeah.
You got to play within the rules that you're given. But yeah, man, I'm not a fan of the spreadsheet.
Yeah. No, yeah, I know it. But yeah, it's just something to keep in mind. And then, yeah, let's move on here. But before we do, a couple more things that are just obvious. Scour the waiver wire. Make sure you're churning the bottom of your roster there to get those backups who will spike in value when their role increases. And then shop your players. Your goal is to accrue value. Don't hang on to your player takes. If value presents itself, like, Joe Burrow for Caleb Williams, like, take it. If it's within reason and it's not a cornerstone to your roster that you're planning around. Okay. Yeah, let's move in here to kind of the opposite, right? So when chaos is hitting and things are getting real, right? So if you're rebuilding and all of a sudden you're winning, you're 3-0, like, what are you doing now? Like, it's kind of a lot of the same stuff, but there's probably some moves that you should be making to ensure that you're not putting yourself in a position where that 101 is out of reach.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's also, I mean, sometimes you go in thinking one thing and that's what we're talking about now, and then the opposite happens. But I think it's a little bit easier to take a rebuilding team that maybe you're coming out of the rebuild. Maybe you weren't sure that this was the year. Maybe you're thinking, oh, I have one more year. I have several picks next year, right? Like, you did a rebuild well. Your rookies that you picked this year or that you traded for, whatever you did, is working out real well. I think when things don't go as you're planned, right? When things are getting real and you're rebuilding, I think there is more chance that you could flip from a rebuilder into a contender of sorts, right? Like, there is that chance, right? Like, if you made the right picks, you made the right moves, and you're still set up for next year, there's nothing to stop you from, like, don't jump the gun, right? Don't go all in, but maybe you make a couple moves to see exactly where you are in a few more weeks. Maybe 4 more weeks pass and now you're an undefeated team and maybe you're more ready than you thought. Like, I wouldn't right now make that move to go from contender to from rebuilder to contender, but I would maybe analyze exactly, right? Like, if it's just like, oh, these old vets that I had are popping off, then that's perfect. That's what you want as a rebuilder, because now you can sell them for even more. But if it's like young studs that you drafted recently that are popping off, right? Like, maybe now Hampton all of a sudden has a really good role. You drafted Igbuka, you drafted like 3 or 4 of these guys that are actually playing really well, and then you had a couple other pieces. Like, I'm not too scared to flip from rebuild to contender in season if I can, right? Like, that's not always going to be the case, and you don't want to jump the gun on a rebuild and ruin it. But there isn't, you gotta analyze, right? You gotta stay water and just really pay attention to how did you get those wins, right? Like, that's the biggest thing. Like, when I'm either things aren't going right, I'm looking at my points for, my points against, and really analyzing like how badly did I lose because of, I got the most points dropped on my head, or I won, but I won with like the third lowest score of that week. Like, those are all things that you need to take into account.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Before you kind of do anything, you should assess the situation, right? And kind of figure out how you got here. Um, yeah, and like when you were describing, like, did you make those moves? Did you get Hampton? Did you get a book? Man, I feel like you were calling out Wookie's team here until Clan 2 because Wookie is looking real good. He's 6-0. He didn't think he was going to be competing. He does have a book on his roster. He's got Omarion Hampton. He's got Roma Dunze. He's got Keenan Allen. And he made a move for Sam Darnold preseason. So he's just kind of, things are falling into place for him. And I came to him last week and I was like, hey man, like I'm looking to get Keenan Allen. And, wisely, he was like, you know what, man, I kind of just want to sit on what I have here and, see where this goes type of thing. And I think that was a really good move on his end. So that's really important to kind of sit and assess how you got where you're at. Like if you did get those picks and you hit on those young guys, yeah, see where things go. But yeah, if for some reason you ended up 3-0 because you're in a best ball league and Trey Tucker's on your squad, you picked him up in the offseason, you didn't think he was going to do anything, and all of a sudden he drops 40 points on your opponent, and then you have Hunter Henry who put up another 30 points who you didn't think was going to do anything. Those, and like your quarterback is Geno Smith and Spencer Rattler and
Or Danny Diamonds.
Danny Diamonds. Your running backs are Braylon Allen and Charbonnet, and they're putting up enough points to keep you going, but they're not getting you anywhere, right? Start selling the production, preferably for picks, but any young developing talent can work too. You want those points off your rosters most of the time. Again, check your league. So that you can get to that 101 more easily, and you're moving it for a more fungible asset. It's gonna grow in value as the season goes on. Those picks, you're trying to buy them now and you're trying to spend them as we approach April when the rookie drafts hit again. So yeah, for the rebuilding, when you're winning, like assess where you're at, make the moves accordingly. And again, the same thing's going to happen if you're contending and you're losing after 3 or 4 weeks, right? You need to assess, like, how did you get here? Did you face tough opponents, or did injuries kind of plague your losses? Do you have some guys that are underperforming, like a Derrick Henry, or did you just have some bad luck? Like you need to sit and look at your roster, how you got to where you're at. Do you still believe in your guys? Are your guys good? And can you still compete in that league? But yeah, if not, right? If you're sitting there looking at a bunch of old guys, that you thought were going to produce, maybe it's like a Mike Evans, or maybe you thought for some reason Cooper Kupp had a chance to come back. Or you're looking at like a DJ Moore who you thought was going to be the wide receiver 1 in Chicago, and you're banking on him to kind of fill a flex spot for you. Like you should start seeing the writing on the wall when it's coming in that direction, and then you should start moving into that rebuild probably. But yeah, I don't know. What's your take on those two things? How are you navigating those waters?
Yeah, no, I agree with pretty much everything you just said. Like, again, I think the points for and points against is a big compass for me. Like, if I pull up my team and I'm 1-4, 1-3 now, or if there's median, I'm whatever it is, somewhat similar, and I have like third most points for, but the most points against. I'm kind of looking at that and like, okay, like I got crushed, somewhat unlucky. The one thing though is the bad luck thing, and I think this helps if you are in more leagues than not. Like just accepting that maybe you just drafted badly and you just had bad takes, or if it's dynasty, right? You hitched your wagon to the wrong guys this year. Maybe you really thought Burrow and Chase were going to carry you, and now Burrow got injured. Like that is bad luck, but at some point you got to kind of just swallow your pride and just be like, damn, like I made some wrong calls. Maybe I made some bad trades in the offseason and things aren't panning out. And don't like hang on too much to the bad luck and the injuries and all that, because it's like, well, it's happened and the injuries have happened, and like sure it was bad luck, but you got to like move on, right? Like the worst thing you can do is be like, oh, it's bad luck, but in 2 weeks, 3 weeks it'll be better. And it's like you hold out and you hold out, and then there's no one to sell people to, or nobody has first left, and you're just really in a bad team. And honestly, I think that's where most of the orphans that come from the offseason happen. I think it's people thought they were going to contend,
They
things doesn't
double
go
down.
well. Yeah, they double down, spend even more picks, and then the offseason comes and they look at their team. They didn't win. Maybe they didn't even make playoffs, and they're like, "Yeah, man, screw this. I'm out." Like, and that sucks for the league, but um, I think that can be avoided if you just have a little bit of humility, swallow your pride, and be like, "Damn, like I built this team bad. I made the wrong trades." Like, and that's okay. I mean, that's why I said like if you're in more leagues, I think that's easier to do because you
Mhm.
just say, "Okay, this one wasn't in, but I have 4 other leagues where I'm doing really well," right? Because that makes you feel better about yourself. That it's not like you know nothing about fantasy football. No, it's like this one just didn't work out, man. It just didn't go your way, and that's okay. It's not it's a lot of luck as well, right? So but everything else, man, I completely agree. Like you gotta really assess. And for the underperformers, that's where you really also want to take a real closer look. Like
Mhm.
how much is this underperformance going to continue? Like, one guy that sticks out that we've talked about quite a bit is like Genty. Like, maybe you, for whatever reason, were a contender or something and got the 101, or you traded for Genty because you just, as a contender or, as a somebody maybe that's trying to win and now you're losing and Genty was supposed to be a big part of it. Like, you need to really like analyze, like, for dynasty purposes, I think he's going to be great, but it just doesn't seem like that O line is going to get any better this season. So can you pivot and he turns more into one of your flex guys? Is that where you need to go get a running back so you don't have to rely on Genty? Is he somebody maybe you can trade for a different stud young? Like, can you do a Genty for Hampton right now? Maybe Hampton's on a different rebuilder team, something like that. Like the underperformers don't stick to the thought of, like you said, take lock and say, well, they're underperforming. Surely they will bounce back. And it's like, well, sometimes people just don't. Sometimes just people are having a bad season, or their time has come, or their circumstances beyond the regular things you can control that you need to move past.
Yeah, I have a question for us later. Like, when is inaction the right move? Because we're talking a lot about, making moves and what the right actions are, but sometimes not making moves is the right move. And I think that it probably falls into line when you have the underperformers, right? Especially if you still have some hope that you can contend, right? You don't need to overreact to these underperformers and make moves to fill holes for them, whether that means pushing all in or splitting your assets or selling them, right? I think you can start a season 0-3 and still get to a playoffs. So when you have these underperformers, I think a lot of times you can kind of sit and wait on them as long as it's the team situation for them still looks good. I think that's okay to kind of go on. And then I like what you were saying about going back to the luck part of it. Is I think the luck should be a narrative or like a situational thing, like um, and it shouldn't be a luck based on player takes, like you're saying, like, oh, Burrow got hurt, that's bad luck, right? Well, yeah, that's bad luck, but you're still out Burrow. Like you can't really just fill that hole with Geno Smith or Spencer Rattler or whoever it is. Like you need to kind of recognize it for what it is. Like that's player injury bad luck, but there's bad luck where it's just like um, a guy who shouldn't have scored as many points as he did that week, and you had the second highest points for in your league that week and you still lost, right? So it's like you're taking a loss. Like that's kind of bad. That the bad luck that I'm talking about is when like you were in a good position to win, but you just ran up against the top top dog in that week, and you just kind of take that lump and you know, go with it. And that can happen 3 weeks in a row. And you just got to keep riding that wave. That's one of my leagues right now. I've played the top 3 contenders in the league, and I'm 0-3 in that league, and I'm like, I think I still have a shot. I'm just kind of gonna ride it out. Inaction is the move for me there. But even if these things, you know, you've assessed it, you've gotten here where you're 0-3, 0-4, and you think you still have a shot. Like, what kind of moves are you making here to bounce back, if anything?
Yeah, I think if I'm contending, one of the things that you kind of just brought up, like in that league, right, where you face those 3 top contenders, I would be analyzing like, did they thoroughly like beat me down? Because I mean, if those are the 3 top contenders, I'm gonna have to see them in the playoffs. And it's
Yeah.
like, was it, a couple of my players underperformed and they kind of beat me by, the difference of those players? Or did they drop like a 70-point beat down on me? Because then it's like, then I might need to reassess, like, okay, maybe their players popped off, but maybe my team is just not enough firepower, right? And that can be kind of just as simple as one trade, right? Like trading for one piece can be the difference, right? But sometimes it's a lot further than that. So I think you have to really analyze, and that's where you got to really be real, right? Because
Hmm.
everybody wants to say or think they're just one trade away, but a lot of times it might not be the case. So it's hard to quantify without like team specifics,
Right.
but if you're doing your due diligence like we're talking about, it'll become clear like, hey, trading for this one guy, it makes me a little bit better, but the other guys have just spiked out of my reach that um you don't win anything for being the fourth best team, the fifth best team, right? Like that's not anything that you want to ever be in. Like I think that's like the worst thing, especially in Dynasty, when you're finishing and getting the 106, 107, like 105, like those are just really bad spots, I think, because you're caught in the middle and you never really want to. So you want to really think about your next move, and I think that's where if you want to take an inaction week to think about it, let's see another week, let's see how things go, let's really pay attention to those guys above me. How did they do, right? How are the teams in the middle, like how much more, right? I think sleeper having that average points scored is a great thing to kind of look at, because you can just really quickly gauge like, okay, like teams in between me and where I want to be, how much more are they scoring? Oh, I'm scoring more than most of them, but I just faced the 3 top teams. Okay, so that lets me know that, okay, I had a rough schedule start. I can make up the difference, right? Like I'm gonna string 5 wins together here, and that's where I think the inactive can come in, right? If you look at your schedule and you think, hey, I'm gonna win the next 4, but then you win the next week, and then the next week you lose again in a matchup you should have won. I think that's where, like, okay, the inactivity, you gave it a shot, especially because we're so early. You could take that time, but now things are still like rocky. Things are still not
Yeah.
going to plan. I think that's when you got to pull the trigger and pull the parachute and start selling off, or like we're talking about, right? This could be the other way. You're like, you were mentioning, right? Wookie, maybe he's 6-0 or whatever now. He waits a couple weeks. Keenan Allen, all his players are still doing great, and he finds himself, he's a top 2, top 3, right? Now maybe it's the time where you decide, okay, well, I have a little bit better chance than I thought. Let's go make a run at this, right? Let's take it out of rebuild mode and go be a little aggressive.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like it. Yeah, I think you can make some other moves too, right? If you have your picks still, um, you should probably be doing what you can to push all in. Are you really even contending if you have future capital? Yeah, I argue probably not, right? So you do what you can, and if you've already kind of pushed all in, and you don't have any picks, that's when you're in a bad spot, and you really have to assess what you need to do. You can split assets, which is a dangerous game to be playing. You can move more dynasty value for production. So like, you trade your CD Lamb and you go get um, two lessers, like a Zay Flowers and a Roma Dunze or something like that, right? Like, um, it's hard. to do that, because now I'd actually feel good about that move. But there's other moves that are not great that you'd want to do. You can mortgage more, right? How far out are you willing to mortgage? Are you going to go out to 2028? Do you feel good about, putting your picks on the line that far out, 3 years of nothing in the bank to kind of fall back on? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, as a rule, unless you're playing with like a really solid league, I don't think letting people trade that far out, because it's like, even if it's paid for, like, people hate coming into an orphan and not having picks and their team being bad, because it's just like, it's so much extra work, and then you're like tanking for somebody else to like get out the 101 or the 102 or 103. So I think letting people, just as a rule, like, kind of side tangent, trade that far out is kind of wild. I mean, obviously people could do whatever. I just personally think it's just a really easy path and a slippery slope to like unfillable orphans. But I think sorry, something got in my eye. Lord.
You're good.
I think what you're saying, it makes sense, right? And like, I think it's also a chance where you could take a big asset and maybe turn it into, like you said, splitting assets, but somebody you believe in, right? If there's an ascending wide receiver that you think is going to be cracking into kind of that top echelon, right? That maybe at the end of the season, you're like talking about CeeDee Lamb and Odunze, or CeeDee Lamb and JSN, right? Like, maybe that's not as big of a gap, but if you could take CeeDee Lamb and go get JSN plus a little bit, maybe like a running back 2 or something. And at the end of the day, by the end of the season, maybe JSN has even outscored CeeDee Lamb, and you grab an extra piece, right? Like, those are, if things aren't going necessarily as well and I don't have picks, that's kind of the moves I'm trying to do if I'm really still trying to compete, is just who's a guy I believe in can potentially score the same amount of points that I could then get an extra piece on top. And even then, that's specifically when I'm looking, maybe somebody's going to throw me a second, somebody's going to throw me a couple seconds, and then now I just take those seconds and go flip it for, another player, right? That's when I think that can work pretty well. But it is definitely a slippery slope, because if you buy into the wrong player and
Yeah.
then they underperform, you just traded away your premier asset. You didn't win. You don't have picks, and now your team is worse off just in general. So it's definitely a real risky move, that you really have to be sure about the who you're downgrading to, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We're already at an hour here. I had another question on there, like, when do we pull the plug? But I feel like we kind of already answered that question. We were really careful about, really just assessing it and kind of determining how you got to where you're at, and making the move early is beneficial to pull that plug. But yeah, man, I think this is really good for dynasty rosters here. We're gonna do this again next week, but we're gonna do it for redraft rosters. We felt like getting this information out about the dynasty is a little more fruitful for you guys, because you should already know where you're standing in the dynasty league coming into it, whereas in redraft it takes a little bit longer for things to shake out. So next week we'll come back with kind of some same ideas here, but more redraft focused, and what you can do to kind of put yourself in position there. But as for now, we're going to get into the intro or the outro here. Thanks again for sticking around with us, guys, and hanging in there. Jose, another one in the books, man. Number 10. This is episode 10. How do you feel?
Yeah, man, it feels great, man. This is still a lot of fun. I think as we keep going, we're only getting better. We're doing a little bit of an extra show episode out there, guys. So if you can be so kind, just let us know, how do you think, how do you like in the scheduling wise, like when the episodes come out, that little extra episode we threw out there. How are you feeling about that? Anything, comment, subscribe, anything you guys can do to help us out, we really appreciate it. And yeah, man, it's always a great time with you, Jmac.
Yeah, it is, man. It's fun. Yeah, we're gonna keep going, keep trucking. Hey, man, have some fun in week 4, guys. We'll see you next time.